Welcome to Innovation in Government, presented by Carahsoft. This program's from the third annual DevSecOps Conference in Reston, Virginia. I'm your host, Francis Rose. The Defense Department's DevSecOps Fundamentals Guidebook defines the goal of DevSecOps as, quote, to improve customer outcomes and mission value through the automation, monitoring, and application of security at every phase of the software lifecycle. Civilian agencies are using DevSecOps in their software development too. Over the next hour, you'll meet leaders from the Office of the Chief Information Officer at DoD and the Air Force Research Laboratory who are on the front lines of secure software development. The leader of a revolutionary unit inside the Marine Corps will tell you how his approach to DevSecOps could change the course of software design all across government. And you'll hear from industry leaders that are supporting the federal government's secure software efforts. First, a look at what agencies need to build software more securely. Rich Savage, Sales Director, Carahsoft, great to see you. Thanks for joining me today. Where is the DevSecOps community right now? What are they talking about? What progress has been made that momentum should continue to drive, that kind of thing? Where are we now?
First of all, Francis, thank you very much for having me today. Very glad to be here. And, from the Carahsoft perspective, we have a very unique perspective on the industry because we get to work with our government customers, our OEMs, and as well as the system integrator community, all of which I feel has a very important role to play in the adoption of DevOps and DevSecOps in the government today. So where we are today, I feel like we've seen what's possible. We've seen what works, and we've learned from some of the past mistakes. And the innovation that is happening today, particularly in the world of AI, and allowing customers to be secure and move faster is incredible to see. And I think we are still at the beginning stages of that upswing in the ability for our government customers to adopt software faster.
Yeah, that's a different way of saying what a lot of people have said theme-wise today. We're on the cusp where that kind of language. What's driving that? And people don't just say it, they say it with enthusiasm. So I wonder what you think is behind that enthusiasm too.
As with all things today, AI, I feel like is driving that to really allow people to see what can be done with a further automation level. And that automation that will come from AI allows us all to move faster. And we've built over the last 6 years, 7 years in industry and government working together, the framework of what that should look like to be able to move that fast. And the controls are in place to allow that fast movement. So in effect, the road has been built, right? And now we have the cars that can go faster.
Mm-hmm. What will continue to drive that? Is it not, I imagine it's not just AI, there will be other factors that will drive momentum.
We can only move as fast as we are secure, right? So AI will present its own challenges with becoming secure, but we are already seeing industry adapt alongside that. Some of the companies that we're bringing on to Carahsoft are solving that problem today, identifying the AI-generated code, being able to sign off on that code and allow that code to be inserted into an application very quickly and securely. So AI is the gas pedal, security is the brake a little bit, but security is keeping up very quickly with the adoption of AI.
Does that model, that gas pedal brake model, is that the way it has to be? Or is there a possibility of a new model coming at some point where the two things kind of integrate and can run on parallel tracks?
They have to run on parallel tracks. They have to. And that's the idea. And that's the benefit of development teams, security teams working together, integrating security into the development lifecycle. That's what allows this to move very quickly. They can't be treated separately from each other. And what's next? I get that question a lot of what does the future look like?
From me in a second, so go ahead.
And the wonderful part about this industry and DevSecOps in general is it allows us to be very agile, right? We don't have to be stuck into a timeline or what is defined as what next, whatever the next mission is, that is what will drive the future growth and drive the adoption of new technology.
And it's fortuitous because the department has been talking about agile development, not just in software, but especially in software, for long enough now that it seems like the cultural points have seeped into the real tactical operational level at the department.
Yeah, culture is talked about anytime you have a conversation around DevSecOps, and especially in the government world. We talk about it a lot in a working group that we do together. There's a saying in the DevSecOps world, which is, don't be afraid to fail. But in government, we can't fail. In private sector, failure is loss of profit. In public sector, failure could be loss of life. So the appetite for failure in public sector is a lot slimmer, which is why security has to be at the forefront of the discussion. And there has to be a little bit of a limiter in terms of how fast we can move forward. And that's why this community, especially on the industry side, and the OEM community and the system integrator community, they have to respect that very much.
Rich, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining me today. George Lambs, Director of Cloud and Software Modernization in the Office of the CIO at the Department of Defense. George, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I told you before we went on the air, had Katie Arrington on the show a couple of weeks ago. She talked about CMMC, the software fast track, a lot of other moving parts around the work that you and your team are doing. How are you putting all of those pieces together so that the person who is using what you're producing, what the department is producing, gets the end result that that person needs for mission delivery and maybe doesn't care about the software underpinnings or the cloud underpinnings or any of that stuff?
We're in this DevSecOps world. And when we say DevSecOps, it just kind of rolls off your tongue, but what is it? It's actually producing something for somebody. When I think in the DevSecOps, the dev world is a lot of what Katie's bringing into the world. The dev is software, it's COTS, it's third-party things. The ops is where it really happens. So how do we get from the dev to the ops is kind of the key. On the ops side, we're looking agile software, breaking down this barrier. So there's two things that are really important in terms of delivery. First is what you produce, and then second is getting there in time so it's relevant. A lot of what Ms. Arrington's looking at is how do we get commercial software into the hands of the end users. Traditional practices, 2 years of requirements definition, 6 months to a year of ATO, operational tests at the end. None of that makes sense anymore. Our team in particular, we love the dev side. We understand the dev side. I think we've proven the dev side. If you look at everything that's been built, Platform One, the dev side works. The ops side is where it's hard. And that's what we're putting a lot of focus in. How do we get programs to adopt the ops side, to push things in so they don't have to go through all these testing? Mm-hmm. One of the big things is taking everything that's on the ops side and pushing it early in the dev cycle. So when you test something, you don't test it at the end, you test it before it gets to the end. When you put something in production, you've already made sure that it's operationally relevant. So that when it gets into production, it's good to go. So that ops side is really what we're trying to focus on, how we get things into the hands of users. And then the second piece of that thing is, how do you get the user feedback back to the dev? Like, we're good at pushing, but we're not good at like pulling and listening and really understanding. Mm-hmm. So if you deliver something in code, what it actually does in the field needs to get back to the developers. Mm-hmm. And that cycle, which culturally, you're really trying to empower the users to feed back into that first cycle. Mm-hmm. So if you use something, you buy it, use it on your iPhone, there's no requirements, it's just there. You look at it, and if it works for you, it works. If it doesn't, you get something else. Mm-hmm. So we want to give that choice to the end users. We want to push things in. And I think that's kind of where the interesting part happens. At a big level, we were just talking about the what's success measured in the department. At the level that I'm judged a lot of the times is, do the $200 million programs get production, right? It's not like how fast do the factories work, how fast do we deliver? It's, are we delivering successful programs? Are we spending our money wisely? Mm-hmm. And when you take a big program and then you turn it into a DevOps thing and you start doing incremental delivery, it's a cultural change, it's a definition change, it's a functional use change, and that's kind of where the hard part is.
Is it helpful that you have a couple of examples now that the department can hang its hat on? I think about examples that came out of the pandemic with flank speed in the Navy, deployed that and got to the ops piece of that relatively quickly, contextually for the department over time. Is that creating momentum in your view that other organizations go, oh, not only can we do this, but we need to do this, and now we have examples that we can follow?
Yeah, it's like an existence proof.
Yeah.
Until it exists, you're not really sure if it's going to exist.
Yeah.
We have some amazing examples. We did the State of DevSecOps report back in March, last time we chatted. That report's out, and it lists examples of like a really great production example, start to finish. We had that with MEPCON. So the recruiting system, replacing a legacy mainframe-based system with a full DevOps. Sort of the great lesson there was that user experience went up dramatically. So users at the beginning, the program is not quite as functional. They're missing features. And then they get used to that. Every 2 weeks they get new features. And then they start saying, hey, we'd like these features. And it's not 2 years later, it's like 4 weeks later, the features. And that feedback loop is what really accelerated. So it wasn't so much the change and transformation, it was the cultural piece that went along with it. And if we can get users to accept that and expect that, then they feedback and they say, we want that. And then that's how the cycle really starts going.
Yeah. Yeah, at the beginning of the conversation when you were talking about the importance of that, I wrote down the term feedback loop that you just used for that reason, because I imagine that perpetuates itself, doesn't it? Once people say, oh, if I tell them I would like to use this thing or this thing didn't work that well and they fixed it and they actually did it, then they're probably going to be more willing to give you more feedback and give you more feedback and give you more feedback.
Yeah, and it's like, think about the reward benefit. There's nothing more rewarding to a developer than to have that product used. Like if you actually deliver something that somebody in the end uses, like, that's amazing. In the old world, when you deliver code to an operational test community and then a year or two later it goes into production, that feedback loop's missing. So the rewards are missing, the sort of the camaraderie and building of the community, that's missing. And we're seeing that too, like even with what we're doing in continuous ATO. Like ATO is a one-time thing, in 3 months you come back. When you're doing continuous ATO, you're always looking at, okay, the code's being produced, the operational effect is happening, we're watching what's happened in production, we can see the rate of change. But when an anomaly happens, and that's always the fun stuff, when an anomaly happens and you actually get to practice, that's kind of what the guts of continuous ATO is. You practice, you see something that's unexpected, you don't panic, you're like, team comes together, everyone does their job together, and that camaraderie gets built. And that's really what we like to see in the whole DevSecOps community, is the camaraderie and the consistency across the team. And if you're not seeing it in production, it's really hard to get that sort of that team community built.
What you're talking about there too, regarding the continuous ATO process, is striking to me because I think it's the latest example of a culture change, and that is the entire department trying to create tools and use each other's tools instead of we're all going to go grow our own. Leonel Garcia was on the show not long ago talking about how they're doing CATO in the Army and making it specifically so that it can be replicated across the department so the other services don't have to figure it out on their own. What's driving that, and what can you do from your position, and what can your office do to maintain that momentum and get people to think that way about other aspects of cloud and software modernization?
Yeah, we've been talking about CATO for 2.5 years, and it's been very frustrating. But the thing I'm realizing that sort of happened, so at the CIO level, we define 3 attributes for CATO. I think ATO, so you have something to start from, the practice concept, making sure your defenders know how to operate, and then the change management through DevSecOps. And we asked the services to give us pathfinders. We knew there's software factories, we knew they're operating good. It's like there's good pathfinders. But all of the CISOs were afraid to give something to the CIO until it was perfect. Like, I'm looking for an 80% solution because I know where we are. You know, ATO is only a portion of it, and like, ATO is good, but it doesn't have to be 100%. You get to the 80% incremental step. So the concept of accepting risk, like putting something that's 80% in, that's 100% better than what's before, but it's not 100% of where you want to get to. That's been the big challenge of ATO, of CATO. So Leo Garcia in the Army, I've been pushing him for a while. I'm like, please, Leo, we need a pathfinder. And he just came up with 3 of them last week.
Yep.
So he was saying he was working on it, and he sent them over. We got them signed from Leo. Effectively, he said the Army approves these 3 programs for doing continuous ATO. That comes to the CIO. Mr. McEwen's going to have to look at those, make sure that they are meeting his standards. And then we've got pathfinders in the Army. And the great thing about the Defense Department, whoever leads, the followers are right behind him. Right. So the Air Force, as soon as Army's got the ATOs, Air Force is going to, and Air Force has great software factories. And I know they're as secure as what Army's already signed off on, so they'll come through. Navy's got the RAISE platform. RAISE platform is a really solid product. That should meet in. So you get a little bit of momentum, just a couple of, we prove existence, and then we prove that we can do this a little bit faster, and then we get competition. Right, now who's going to be the most secure? It doesn't really matter. They're all going to be much more secure than we were before. We're getting product through much faster. Every 3 years we want to get recompete because we're practicing every day. We're getting the change management. We've got more information about what's in the field. So yeah, it's pretty exciting when we actually get over this. It takes a long time, but I feel like we're right on the cusp. Mr. Garcia signing those 3, that was huge. So, and I know Mr. McEwen, he's going to have to examine them. So there's still a little bit of, make sure it's appropriate for all the risk levels. Mm-hmm. But taking that first risk level and then distributing the risk down. So, it's not the AO that's taking full responsibility. It's the team, it's the cyber defenders, it's the developers, it's the users, it's the anomaly, it's the AI that we have bringing this all together. All that sort of fitting together makes this, it operates as a community.
It's always great to talk to you, George. I appreciate your time today.
I love being here and talking to you, Francis. Thank you.
Matthew Gravis is Public Sector CTO for Atlassian. It's great to see you again on the other side of the government-industry divide. One of the things that you really fostered at the State Department was collaboration. What's a total collaboration landscape look like in your view in the context of a DevSecOps environment and operations?
Totally. Great to be with you, Francis. I'll start there. Long time coming and something I've been wanting to do for a bit. Where does collaboration start and end and what makes it successful? It's a huge question. You don't start and succeed on your own. Like at the end of the day, it's a team sport. I saw that. My last job was the Chief Data and AI Officer at the State Department and relied on a whole team of different kinds of folks to get it done. So there's kind of 2 dimensions of collaboration the way I look at it. Like one is a human layer, a personnel layer. The other is a technology layer. I mean, on the personnel layer side, it starts with leadership attention. I was at the State Department for 5 years. I had a really healthy amount of top cover and support from Deputy Secretary. Last June, I did a fireside chat with Secretary Blinken. And so having that top cover is valuable in a couple of different ways. One is kind of an implicit endorsement that what you're doing is important so that when leaders are speaking inside the agency to their workforce, they're saying, hey, this stuff matters, this technology stuff matters. You can imagine like a Secretary of State who's on the road nonstop, 1 million plus miles each of the last several Secretaries of State. They don't have a lot of time for internal stuff. And so for somebody at that level to spend time on an important topic to us, like technology modernization, agency modernization, things like that, is really impactful and sends a pretty clear message to the workforce that it's important. We also had leadership attention when it came to making decisions on where we spent our time in our modernization journey. We had this campaign concept where every 6 months we were doing a couple of different major transformations, and the Deputy Secretary and the Undersecretaries would sit around the table and make decisions about which of those would happen. I'd be the presenter, you'd hear undersecretaries argue over who gets this modernization effort to focus on their mission space. That's when you know you got them, right? When they're fighting over who gets to do the work. And so that kind of leadership attention is really important. Also on the human side, partnership is everything. We launched an AI steering committee, and it wasn't like let's spend 3 months preparing a charter and that kind of stuff. It was literally, let's send out an invite to something called the AI Steering Committee, and people will show up. And it was everybody who had equities in the agency around adopting AI for our workforce. So that included like the privacy official, that included the ethics official, that included the cybersecurity folks in a substantial way, legal, et cetera. Anybody who would have a say in this, let's get them involved right away. And that's especially important when the technology you're trying to use to modernize is new. Like when generative AI hit in November of 2022, when it became available to the public, nobody knew the ins and outs of the technology. And what you don't want is a serial way of the developers developing, building the technology, and then handing it to a security team who has to then learn what the technology is as well. So getting everybody, same with legal, getting everybody involved early, I think is really valuable. From the technology layer standpoint, one of the reasons I joined Atlassian was because I'm a systems engineer. I think about things in terms of a system. Collaboration is everything in a system because you're understanding like the interdependencies of people and processes and platforms and things like that. And so I thought it was really valuable to be able to build platforms that have capabilities that allow teams to collaborate. And Atlassian was really attractive to me from that perspective. Our stock ticker is team, literally. So it's really about how do we empower teams to maximize their productivity, to maximize the outcomes for their particular mission, whether it's an agency or a company.
What did you learn on the government side and now on the industry side about how those two sides of the equation should collaborate together effectively?
I took a lot of meetings with vendors in government. I think that all too often the solution is presented first to the government instead of understanding the challenges. And so I'm trying to bring that mindset to Atlassian where we walk in and we say, what are your challenges? And not just like, what are your technology challenges? Forget the technology for a second. Let's back up and let's talk about business challenges. What are your mission challenges? What's a pain in your neck, today as an executive or as a leader? And how do we go about solving those? And I think if we flip-flop the conversation, oftentimes that's really, really helpful.
Matthew, I'd love to talk more. We're out of time. Thanks for joining me today. Katie Bowen, Senior Vice President of Global Revenue for SYNAC. It's great to see you again. Thanks for joining me. What are you seeing organizations doing in government that are using automation in the DevSecOps environment to its fullest potential?
Yeah, great question. In enterprise DevSecOps, you often hear folks talk about the golden path. And that path is the enterprise-approved way to get software to production quickly. And you might have some variations on that path, just based on the criticality or security concerns regarding that system or application. But ultimately, the organizations that are succeeding is removing humans from the loop to the maximum extent possible, really to reach that pipe dream, pun intended, of continuous deployment, not just continuous delivery. Mm-hmm. And so the folks that are integrating a security testing fabric into that software development lifecycle are the folks that are seeing what is previously a human-led aspect of pen testing or other security testing to be happening faster and more on demand with that previously human-led approach. Mm-hmm. So that's one example.
Continuous deployment is a term that I don't hear very often. Continuous delivery, yes, all the time. Continuous deployment is different in what way, in your view?
There's very little human interaction to that software getting to production. So the developer says, push to prod, and it happens, the container is configured, everything happens on the fly, And all of those checks and balances are met in order to get that software to production. So one example might be Amazon. Not only are they doing all sorts of A/B testing on us every day, depending on where we are in the country or what type of customer we are, but they're updating the interface that we see every day on Amazon.com, I mean, thousands of times a day. So that's one example of continuous deployment.
What do agencies and government need to do to prepare themselves to be able to deliver in that kind of an environment? Or can you just kind of flip the switch and go?
Yeah, I mean, there's some discussion about there will always be a human in the loop, especially for those externally facing applications that are so mission critical, or that you are in the hands of users in a big way or somehow in the kill chain or something like that. But I think the more you think about cycle time and developer experience and how you're really getting your users the software they need, you start to think differently about that software supply chain and that time to deployment, really.
When you think differently about that software chain, what are the components of it that you would advise people to focus on if they're really trying to move the needle on what you've described?
Yeah, I think it's important to always be mapping your path to production, talking to the organization, really understanding what bottlenecks they're facing. If they're using a sprint cycle or any sort of development cycle, that's great. But if it takes from time to code complete to get to production, 20, 30 days, and there's a whole bunch of testing that goes on in that process, it's really hard for developers to remember what they did when they get that application component returned to them to fix or patch. So we want to look at those human access points, what the bottlenecks are. It's just like manufacturing to some extent, right? And then start attacking those in a way that's meaningful and enterprise scalable.
Are those bottlenecks common? Do you see the same ones over and over again, or does it vary depending on the type of application being developed, the organization, the mission that they're trying to deliver for, any of those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think we see snowflake paths develop because of all those special things. But really, the goal is to get to, 3 to 6 different paths to production that maybe have different security requirements based on whether it's a crown jewel application or system or an externally facing or there's transaction components to it. But the reason I joined Synack is pen testing was always kind of that black hole in that process. So when an app was deemed required or a change was big enough to require pen testing and human-led pen testing, it would be a 2-week to 1-month process or bottleneck, if you will. So what we've done at Synack is we've put hooks into Git with some SDLC integrations or any CI/CD platform that you can actually notify researchers to attack or pen test that application change or component. And so that makes it on-demand, always on, and continuous testing, which is really important in a continuous monitoring environment as well.
What should people in organizations in government that are involved in this stuff be thinking about today that maybe is not on their radar screen now, isn't a concern today, but it's over the horizon that they should be prepping for today?
Yeah, when we think about automating, I mean, there's all sorts of co-pilots out there today that are supporting developers and supporting all parts of the software development lifecycle. I think we're going to see a revolution in the DaaS market with agentic AI. So, really thinking about how the implications of co-pilots are going to potentially continue to create more vulnerabilities in that software development lifecycle. So it really just makes testing in pre-production even more important, as well as in post-production, and always thinking about your security posture and the vulnerabilities that you could be creating over and over again if you're not careful.
Katie, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks for your time today. Dave Raley's Digital Program Manager for Marine Corps Community Services. Dave, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me. What's
the story behind Operation Stormbreaker, and why is it relevant to the discussion we're having today about DevSecOps?
It's interesting, yeah. So Operation Stormbreaker was built to solve a couple of problems that we internally had in our organizations. A couple things. One, waterfall development and acquisition process and legacy compliance. Those two things led our organization to have these big bottlenecks, and usually the bottlenecks kind of appeared on the ATO front to say, oh, we can't get this thing through because we're waiting for an ATO, but it was really a deeper problem than that. Not good cyber programs and the inability to get through the compliance process, and honestly, an over-reliance on the actual compliance as a checklist as opposed to really looking at risk postures and how do we move at speed. So we built Operation Stormbreaker to help solve those problems for our organization successfully. So we got a AWS IL4 landing zone that's authorized by the Marine Corps, the first cloud-native access point and advanced zero trust in a Marine Corps environment. So that landing zone, then we also built a software factory in that landing zone and got a Navy Marine Corps certification that allows us to deliver containerized workloads at the speed of relevance into production with an authorization, which in this case in 15 minutes. So you're now taking authorization timelines under that legacy compliance process, and this is general across the DoD, of 12 to 18 months. And now you're collapsing that orders of magnitude faster, which I firmly believe is really where we have to be if we're going to be in a situation where we can either deter or win in a conflict if we were compressing those cycle times and be able to deliver secure, reliable, authorized workloads at the speed of relevance. So we built that around there. Operation Stormbreaker, and the reason why I'm excited to talk to you today and kind of generally talk a lot about Stormbreaker is this is a government-to-government business. So inside the Marine Corps, as a government organization, we are actually now able to scale and support other DoD mission owners with the same capability we built for ourselves. And there's multiple other software factories and capabilities like this across the DoD, so we're one of those. We're uniquely positioned and really fine-tuning on a mission owner has a capability and they need to get it in production. And we're, instead of dragging them down on building infrastructure, trying to figure out the authorization point pieces, the security, the zero trust, we're providing all of that through the entire platform as a service end-to-end for the mission owner. And I kind of have a dream and I'm really passionate about this idea of, wouldn't it be great if every DoD mission owner had the deployment option of a capability like Stormbreaker, where they could just say, I have a need, I want to bring a FSI in, or I want to bring my own team in to do dev in a certified pipeline that allows me to do this. The other interesting thing is, as a part of Marine Corps Community Services, which is a organization in the Marine Corps, we support quality of life services for Marines and their families as a MWR and retail exchange type of organization. And any revenues that we generate from this technology service that we're offering to the rest of the DoD just goes back to support Marines and their families through our programming that we offer. So it's a really interesting loop that's really beneficial to both the DoD mission owners and advancing kind of our overall strategy from a Department of Defense perspective and going back to supporting those patrons that we're serving.
When you expressed the goals of that at the beginning of your description there's one thing that jumped out at me, and that was the issue surrounding waterfall development in acquisition. Normally, I think of that from a technology perspective, and I don't think about the challenges that waterfall development causes for acquisition. What was the dynamic there that caused folks to say, this isn't just a problem for the way we make the stuff, it's a problem for the way that we buy the stuff that we need to make the stuff, is what it sounds like.
And yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. So I intentionally, and it's a little derogatory, use the term waterfall on purpose. In fact, today, we're at the DevSecOps event in Carahsoft's office, and Mr. Lamb from the DoD CIO's office was addressing this very thing, talking about how do we actually drive waterfall development out of the department. And so Operation Stormbreaker is one of the ways that we're demonstrating across the DoD that you can do that. The reason I associate the two, acquisition and waterfall development, is because they're very much the same type of mindset and they're very, very interconnected. So a couple things. One, in waterfall development, you determine in advance that you're going to know exactly what you need. You're going to spend potentially multiple years determining what you need. Then you go out and acquire it. I've seen it take well north of a year just to define the requirements for a system where you're writing click level requirements. And then you enter the acquisition phase. That's even before you get to acquisition. You show up at the acquisition office, you're like, all right, go buy me this thing. You put out an RFP and the providers say, sure, we'll build that for you. No problem. It's going to only cost this much in this much time, right? And then they come in, they're like, oh, we don't have the infrastructure. We got to build the infrastructure, get the authorization process, and then we're not delivering workloads for many months, if not years, after we acquire. So now you just talked about a 4 or 5 month cycle. And then when you do it that way, you don't want to go and touch that thing because it was so much effort with the project teams and all the let's just leave it alone for 10 years. And then now all of a sudden our browsers aren't compatible. Right. It doesn't work with the operating system, but we don't want to touch it. And then now we just got to do a complete replacement. So it's a terrible cycle. Yeah. So this is why I'm addressing that it's a cultural practice policy technical debt problem. If you apply the DevOps and agile methodology to both how you acquire and how you do development, you can actually compress cycle times to inside of months easily because you're actually focusing on delivering working capability. And you combine that together with our infrastructure and our certified pipeline that allows you to get production authorized workloads out, you can actually now start building capability even at the prototype stage and put it into production and have it used. So our organization is undergoing a huge culture shift where we start to think about product teams versus project teams. And I know there's many pockets of excellence across the government and in DoD where that's starting to happen. It needs to be much more ubiquitous where people think of, I'm going to get a capability, I'm going to get a prototype and then an MVP, and I'm going to start enhancing as I go. I'm not going to wait multiple months or years before I do that. Another interesting thing that I've worked on dealing with related to this is the sprint-based contracting approach. And so when I see a lot more of the FSIs doing this, and I think that's a really good practice. And speaking to the FSIs, please do much more of that. Look for platforms like Stormbreaker and then work with your customers to do it based on, hey, we've got a firm fixed level of effort for a 2-week sprint. We can define the actual number of items that we're going to deal with, and then we get the definition of done agreed to with the product owner. We deliver that, and you invoice me, and I know exactly what I'm paying for as a contracting officer's representative. My KO can come and look and say, wow, you told them to build this, they build it, you agreed, now I'm going to invoice for those items. So that simple process, and then you can take that development in any direction you want to. So in my case, when we create workloads, I don't even have a description of the workload in the task order for the contractor. Just like, oh, I have a batch of sprints available. I would like to start working on this workload. Okay, let's do discovery together. So you have the actual developing team in the early part of the product operating model, and you actually start to build this as a product as opposed to a project. So I know that's really a lengthy way to describe it, but that is why I'm saying there's a direct link and tie between waterfall development and acquisition.
It's a great explanation and great work you're doing. Thanks for joining me today to talk about it. Jay Ryan's Federal Program Manager for Security Compass. Jay, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining me. Are there common roadblocks that you see for organizations in government that are moving to or moving through the process of installing a DevSecOps environment?
Well, that's a loaded question, Francis. There's not enough time in the day, I think, for us to cover all of them. But there are some common ones. I think primarily the government steps into on a regular basis. And there's been a lot of conversation now with Katie Arrington coming out and saying, let's blow up the RMAF and SWIFT, which is great leadership. It needed to happen. It's a great conversation starter. I think what it's really doing is giving us the opportunity to take a deeper look at NIST RMF, how it's being employed, and if it's being employed in the intent that I think it was originally framed with. It's meant to be flexible. It's meant to be usable. It's not meant to be so rigid as I think others have made it. And that has become a primary roadblock in this DevSecOps ATO approach inside the Fed government.
So if we take what Katie has talked about as the conversation starter, where would you like to see that conversation go so that the government gets the best possible outcomes?
Absolutely. I think they've done a great job now in soliciting from industry. What are the best practices that we've seen work? How have we attained efficiencies and speed? So I think they're going to digest that, learn from that. And I think we'll actually see a great outcome around what they end up implementing in the end, which will be fundamental useful change for accelerating DevSecOps and ATO processes. Yeah.
What's the best role for industry to play in that conversation, and what does government need to bring to the table?
So industry is doing a great job with outreach always. I mean, we're always trying to sell, of course, to the government. But I think, especially in this community, DevSecOps, as it has kind of organized itself across the last 3 years, we're really bringing strong, practical approaches to the government. And in turn, the government's done a great job of actually coming to us and listening and soliciting advice. Because we are often in the trenches, seeing these roadblocks as we run into them on a regular basis, and coming up often with very unique or novel ways to get around those. And they're learning from that and taking that feedback. So I'm very happy to see that taking place.
The current leadership at the Pentagon is not the first leadership group that has tried to kind of change the way the building does business, in particular around software, but more broadly. What do you see happening differently that gives you optimism that this time it might stick? And again, what does the future of that look like in your view, both from an industry side and from a government side?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. I think the major change right now is alignment. You're seeing alignment from the top down in incentivizing the push to make this happen. In the past, it's been, yes, overarching policy, but really no technical guidance and no pushing that decision tree down to the lowest levels to where it can actually take action. And that's what's really setting this administration apart. People in leadership positions in DoD are being empowered to make change happen in those roles. So that's something we're really excited about.
I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to that idea of trying to push it down through the organization. That's where I imagine we would see a difference in the way that culture operates, and not just a way that people go through the motions of making whatever thing it is that they're supposed to make happen. Is that?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment, absolutely. Culture is king within technology developments. If great people respond well to great culture. We've seen that time and time again. Culture's been a cornerstone of DevSecOps. People process technology, as you likely have heard from many respondents, and cultural is a big part of ensuring that people are engaged in that process, for sure.
All right, what's the evolution here that you see? DevSecOps has come from we've been at it for a long time in this community, I guess. Where do you see things going, and what should people on both sides, industry and government, be thinking about today that maybe they don't have to deal with today, but is coming down the pike at them?
Well, I mean, it's the big thing that we've not mentioned yet in this interview, AI, of course. Yeah. So that's going to be a future. Where does that sit? What efficiencies do we gain from deploying AI technologies in this process? How do we secure and ensure those AI technologies are secure in their employments? That's where the future is going right now. Long-term vision is across the board: distributed systems, advanced networking, layers of technology that overarching come together to really empower the warfighter, empower the mission, and even from the federal civilian side, really ensure that the technology on the Fed side serves the people and is something that we can trust.
Jay, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me today.
I appreciate you, Francis.
Patrick Lorigan's Technical Director at the Air Force Research Laboratory. Patrick, thanks for joining me today. How are you and your colleagues using automation, applying automation tools to the ATO process?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way we're applying automation, we have our full DevSecOps pipeline that we've got out there. The entire thing is automated. So every time one of our developers pushes an update to our software baseline, it goes through a series of automated scans for security, quality, and then also does a series of tests. So it does a bunch of regression tests and all kinds of other things to make sure that everything's good. And so what we've done is processes that historically have taken weeks or months. We run everything through a manual process, especially on the functional testing. We're able to run those in minutes. And so the whole end game of that is it really allows us to push our software out rapidly rather than waiting on manual processes.
Have you seen a difference in delivery? It sounds like speed is one of the differences that you've seen, but what other differences have you seen, if any?
I mean, speed's one we talk about a lot, but honestly, security and quality are both significantly better. Historically, again, we would get software deliveries, something would come in, we would run a bunch of scans on it kind of at the end, and then provide that back to the developers who would essentially pick the most important things, fix those, and ignore everything else. Because we're doing this every single time, there's a push of software into our repository, so multiple times a day. If something is found, it's fixed immediately. And gets rolled back in, and security-wise, same thing. So rather than historically, a lot of projects have said we're only going to address critical and high findings. We can address things much down to medium or even low level, much more minor things, because it takes seconds or minutes to fix it. You're not delaying your entire deployment by weeks to fix a variety of what would otherwise be minor issues, but sometimes those add up.
Did you have to do anything from an infrastructure perspective or as part of a preparatory process to prepare to integrate these automation tools into your pipeline?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that goes into that. I mean, everyone looks at kind of the end product, but in terms of building up that whole pipeline process, there's years of work in there to get it built, to select the tools, to get them all integrated, and then also to get our authority to operate from our authorizing official, which is what lets us actually deploy. So getting all that in place takes a significant amount of time, year or two to get that all set up. So then our product teams that actually do software development are able to use that, and to them it looks very quick. But yeah, there's a lot of work to get all that up and running ahead of time.
Now that is up and running, is there a maintenance process required for that underpinning, or can you just kind of let that roll?
No, we constantly update. So we roll in updates to the platform pipeline every couple of weeks or more often than that. Security patches, critical findings there get rolled up even sooner. And then we're always looking at new and better tools, how we could bring things in. Sometimes we want better quality. Sometimes we find something that's as good or better and cheaper. And so we're always looking at ways to improve the tooling as well as keep all of our stuff as secure as possible.
Have you run across any unintended consequences or surprises that you didn't anticipate that you would want to caution somebody about that's going through this process for the first time?
I think for us, it's not even really unintended. It's just something to keep in mind, especially working in the Department of Defense. We move very rapidly. It's great to say, we can take an update, push it out. We can have that done in, minutes, hours, days. What we found is that there's not always an appetite from our users to get updates as quick as that. So kind of in the private world and your commercial world, your companies, Netflix, whoever it is, push updates, thousands of times a day. It's great. Sometimes if your video glitches for a second, it's not the end of the world. For our users that are out there, on the operations floors, they want a little more rigidity. So even though we are able to push things and move as fast as we can, sometimes we have to kind of hold off on and slow down a little bit. Just because of the real world use cases, some of the things we do.
The word rigidity that you use there, I think, is an interesting one as far as what the expectation of the end user is. And I imagine that's a delicate balance that you have to walk. Rigidity that the end users want and resilience that the systems probably need and require over time.
Yeah, and that was definitely something that, when I first started doing this, I wasn't expecting. I thought they'd want updates all the time. But yeah, there is definitely, there is specific processes and the way things work, and our users need to know that what they get works. They need to know how it works, and so they're definitely, they always want new features. But they just want to make sure they know when stuff's coming out, and that they don't get that random glitch here and there. So all the automation we do does a lot to make sure that doesn't happen. And then we just definitely work very closely with our end users to make sure that we push those out to them when they're ready for them and they understand what they're getting.
That's kind of where I wanted to go next. How do you stay connected and integrated with them, connected to them, integrated with them to make sure that you are kind of in sync with what their needs and requirements are?
Yeah, so that's something that's different in this effort than I've had in some of my previous projects with the Department of Defense. Our product teams talk to the users regularly, so it kind of varies by team. Some teams are talking to them every couple of days, every couple of weeks, and some of our less, the slower rollout ones, they push an update and they're talking to them. But even there, every month they're syncing up with they're actual users of the software. So there isn't this long cycle between, we got a requirement, we push it out, and then a year or two later, the users are looking at it and giving feedback. We're talking to them regularly, and then, figuring out what's good and bad on the software and how we can adjust.
How do you judge when you make progress in a particular area that is it as simple as the end user says this does what I wanted it to do, or is there more to it than that?
There's more to it. I mean, that's the easiest way. We roll it out, it looks at it, but there's definitely a whole kind of user research process that goes into, we don't just want to give the users what they ask for. We want to give them what's going to be best for them. We also try to talk to as many users as we can, get a bunch of different viewpoints on things and go forward. We definitely had cases where, multiple groups are asking for similar features, but in different ways. And it's on our teams and, those professionals to figure out the best way to deliver that capability. And so it's not just, not always whoever ranks the highest gets what they want. It's really what's going to work best for the overall system. And really the key there is to talk to as many users as you can.
Has the zero trust effort that the department's taken on changed or redirected the way that you and your colleagues do what you do?
A little bit. We've been leveraging zero trust pretty much since it's been rolling out within the department. So we work closely with Platform One, who has been kind of a pathfinder there. And so from our perspective, it hasn't changed much because we've been leveraging it almost since the beginning of our existence as a software development shop. So in that way, we're it hasn't changed necessarily. We're definitely using it, and we're watching. I'm very interested now as it's growing wider adoption, how that's going to change and impact some of us that have been doing it early on.
Patrick, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Great, thanks for having me.
Matt Connor is Chief Information Security Officer at Second Front Systems. Matt, thanks for joining me today. What are the roadblocks that you see to organizations across the government trying to integrate DevSecOps into the way that they build software now?
I think the biggest challenges are cultural. I think the challenges are largely associated with people and process. I think industry has shown that we can solve the technology challenges of modern DevSecOps and deliver at speed. I think the real challenges are the approaches for contracting seem to be a giant roadblock for agencies embracing speed to need. We see still not seeing enough embracing things like SIBRs and StratFIs, TACFIs, other transactional authorities, CRADAs, cooperative research and development agreements, ways to co-develop features and deliver features and services to agencies in need at speed. I think years and years of acquisition training has taught contracting folks out there that there needs to be a firm fixed price vehicle to transfer risk to the company. It needs to be well-defined deliverables, and I think that really undermines the promise of DevSecOps, which is handling change, a little bit of ambiguity in requirements, and doing that really with great velocity. Those are huge challenges I see from a contracting perspective. I think on the security side, I think there's a lot of growth opportunity there. I think a lot of our security personnel out there are still looking for discrete hardware and software inventories for ephemeral cloud native applications. Those things, exported from DevSecOps pipelines to governance, risk, and compliance platforms in the form of PDFs and spreadsheets that are stale at the moment that they're exported. I really think that the security personnel out there, there's probably some upskilling, education opportunity there to overcome the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of things constantly changing, which is the real, true heart of DevSecOps. I think that the more we as technology providers can build platforms that yield continuous insight into operations, steady state operations, and risk posture, not just a moment in time view of vulnerability, a moment in time view of resources, but a continuous insight into what is the true operating state of this application, function, or whatever. I think the better off security personnel will be. They need that real risk insight. I think the other challenge for security folks is looking at things as outcome-based and not as systems. Not that soda straw view of one discrete set of processing resources, but a set of capabilities that deliver on a function, a business process, a mission outcome. Understanding what is the real risk to delivering that capability. I think that's the real trick that we've got to pivot in with agencies and in the government.
You mentioned contracting approaches at the beginning of your comments there. My thought was do the right approaches exist and people aren't using them, or does somebody need to create those right approaches? It sounds like you think that the right approaches already exist and people aren't leveraging them to the degree that they could. Am I hearing you right?
I do, yeah. I think the mechanisms exist to make small bets, to co-develop with partners, to iterate over time. I think that there's too much emphasis on sort of the big classic source selection, some of the big classic integration contracts, those kinds of things. I think that those mechanisms that I mentioned, SBIRs, TrapFis, TACFis, those kinds of things, they're there. They just don't get used enough. And I don't know if it's because of scrutiny or the burden of regulation or just fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But I think that we're not seeing enough embracing of those small bets, and the mechanisms are in place.
Is it a matter of some leadership somewhere telling people you have to start doing this? Or is there a carrot approach versus a stick approach? What would drive that utilization, do you think?
I think it's both. I think we are seeing some innovative leaders. I mean, there are people in the Army, for example, that are really leaning forward with us to make those, to leverage those kinds of contract vehicles. Nothing breeds adoption like success. And so leveraging some of those contract vehicles, yielding a quick outcome that is responsive to need, I think breeds adoption. And so we're seeing those kinds of things. There's a bit of a flywheel effect of once it succeeds somewhere, everybody else wants it. But I think it's both. I do think that tone starts at the top. The more leaders emphasize, I want fewer big, massive integration contracts that take years to award and years to execute, the more that leaders sort of say, I'm going to lean forward, I'm going to take a little bit of risk here. I mean, you can take calculated risks. You have to calculate them, but you take calculated risks. But the more that I think leaders convey that tone, the more that we'll see people willing to step out a little bit out of their comfort zone and embrace some of those more innovative approaches.
Is measuring success as simple as we delivered a secure end product, or we delivered a product that's secure and in an iterative process, but it's now doing something for the end user? Or is there more to it than that, Matt?
That's an interesting question, and I'm not sure that there's a substantive difference. I mean, ultimately, what we're after is outcomes, right? So we have a need, whether that need is to deliver an intelligence product, whether that need is to deliver a defense product, or whether that need is to improve a business process for a taxpayer. I think that the outcome is what ultimately matters, and doing it in a sufficiently agile way that responds to change, I think, is the real measure of success there. Doing that in a way that yields the insight that security risk acceptors need, that's table stakes, right? There's just simply no substitution for having continuous insight into the risk posture of that system.
Matt Connor of Second Front on innovation in government. Thanks for joining me for this Innovation in Government program presented by Carahsoft. If you missed any part of the show, you can watch it in its entirety on our website at fedgovtoday.com or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night.